Hello everybody and welcome to another video. I'm back today from like a week of just grinding out Cratekin and not putting out videos. I don't even have Cratekin yet. But there's been some pretty big stuff going on news-wise in the Guild Wars community I wanted to jump on before I fall super behind, and that's the idea of the next feature pack. It was announced last week and they have even begun to roll out the blogs detailing what is going to be in this feature pack. It all looks very exciting right now. It's a bit mellow, the kind of information they're releasing. It's been predominantly about PvP stuff. And I must be honest, I haven't PvP'd for a long time. Even the feature pack and the reward changes there didn't encourage me to PvP more. In fact, it probably encouraged me to PvP less because it just instantly gave me Dragon and I didn't care about ranks anymore. But still, some of this stuff is pretty interesting. It looks like there's a lot more money going into PvP in terms of tournament rewards, and just like they did with the Tournament of Legends, they're thinking about the kind of rewards players will actually want to go for in these tournaments outside of just like real life cash prizes. So let's talk about it. They also released just today information about future balance changes, which we'll get to very shortly. The way they have this structured out is the feature pack is going to release on the 9th of September. Some of you guys might not realize this, but the most recent Living World patch, we're actually on break now. It's not the end of the season, but we are on break. Waiting all the way till September 9th does seem like a bit of a long wait. It's about a month with nothing going on in the Living World. That said, there will be plenty of blogs to tide us over in the meantime, and hopefully if this feature pack is anything like the previous one, it should be a substantive change to the game. May I remind you guys, the previous feature pack gave us the wardrobe, which was a pretty huge change. It gave us mega servers, which was definitely a huge change. It had the trait rework, which hasn't been entirely positively taken in the game for people who already had level 80s, but I think was a really solid change. It had all those changes to PvP rewards. It had the account-bound dies and the account-bound legendaries, and a lot more. Like, it was a pretty big update, so let's hope this feature pack does the same. So far, they have announced that there are going to be 3 weeks of blogs, and each time we move into a new week, they're going to change the kind of things they're talking about. So the first week is competitive week, okay? That will be tailored towards PvP-based stuff, competitive stuff, right? The first one was the announcement of a new tournament, the World Tournament Series. I'm just going to read verbatim what they say about the World Tournament Series so I don't mess up one of these minor details. There's a lot of information packed into this one small sentence. So here we go. The World Tournament Series is a new international competitive PvP circuit that will provide 3 opportunities for top teams from North America, Europe, and China to traverse the globe and fight for their share of a $50,000 prize pool at each event. So 3 opportunities, that's 150,000 US dollars that have just been thrown at PvP in an attempt to get some kind of a competitive scene going. And it's international, so yes, now that China play the game, they have PvP. I don't know how good they are at it at the moment. I remember when they originally get their client, some people were playing over on the Chinese servers, and it was kind of funny to see how bad they did, but I'm sure they've got better since. It will be a huge event, the World Tournament Series. If you are invited to this thing, you qualify for it, you get sent around the world. You will end up in Beijing, for example. I believe that's where the first event is being held. The way that they're inviting people to the World Tournament Series is they're going to be looking at an upcoming Tournament of Glory. So, the Tournament of Glory is also a new thing they've announced. It's a sister tournament to the Tournament of Legends. So, let's back up for everyone who's listening to me that is like a pure PvE player. Okay, right now, what they did very recently with the feature pack was they announced the Tournament of Legends, okay? And if you won or you ranked well among your peers, they would give you flat out a legendary weapon. The only one you couldn't get flat out was Eternity because it's basically 2 legendary weapons. But if you won, you'd get a legendary weapon. If you came second, you would have your choice at like a Gift of Mastery or a Gift of Fortune straight up, plus a lot more rewards. It was actually one of those rare occasions where I saw a lot of people on my PvE friends list that were saying, oh my god, I really kind of want to go play this. And it seemed like for the first time ArenaNet had really tapped into getting PvEers and people from other formats of Guild Wars 2 to try out their PvP. It was pretty cool. I even played in that tournament for what it's worth. I didn't sign up or have a formal team. I was just called at the last minute by some old friends that I used to PvP with, and they were like, hey, quick, we need a 5th. And we did terribly, but I got a llama finisher out of it, so I'm pretty happy. Anyway, so that's what they had already done. Now there is going to be a sister tournament to the Tournament of Legends called the Tournament of Glory. This doesn't reward legendary weapons, so you might be thinking, why am I interested in this at all? Well, they're adding an entirely new armor set to PvP called the Glorious Heroes Armor. And this is what you get for winning or doing well in this tournament. Now, does that excite you guys as PvE players? I personally think it is better than a legendary weapon as a reward. This armor is set to be very exclusive to winners of these tournaments. If the reason why you wanted a legendary weapon was because it looked flashy and cool and you wanted to stand out, the exact same situation applies here with this armor, except this armor will be even rarer than legendary weapons. Tons of people have made legendary weapons. Every day, more and more people make legendary weapons. But this armor, there will only be very rare opportunities to get it. It's always there. It's as much a part of your character as your legendary weapon would be, and you're going to look like a total boss if you manage to get it. So I do think they've had a really good idea here, and with any luck, the Tournament of Glory is going to be just as popular as the Tournament of Legends was. So back to what we were originally talking about, the World Tournament Series. If you do well in the Tournament of Glory, the top teams from here will be invited to participate in the World Tournament Series, where all of this real world money is and things start to get super serious. Anyway, so the first blog, just to clarify, just announced the existence of the World Tournament Series. Personally, for me, I'm not really interested. I'm not comfortable that I would have 5 people of my similar skill level and my similar opinions about the game and the way the meta works and team comps that I'd like to run, that I'd actually be able to go in there and make some serious headway. But don't let that, guys, put you off too. I really think the next best thing ArenaNet should be doing is they can announce cool events like this, but then they need to facilitate some way for people to find teams better. For someone who's only ever spent time in PvE, there is a huge gap right now, and it will be intimidating for anyone to get a team, and I think that is now the biggest barrier. I think most people like the idea of these rewards, they just can't feasibly see themselves winning them. Alright, so that was one blog. The other blog was focusing more on the idea of this armor, as well as a totally new feature for PvP. So let's just linger on the armor for a second, because I think ArenaNet made a mistake here. I think someone had a really cool idea, and they said, look, if we have this exclusive, cool armor that looks awesome, they talk about their inspirations for the design of this armor. They said that back in Guild Wars 1, okay, there was this awesome place called the Hall of Heroes, which was where you'd end up and the top teams would end up fighting in this kind of semi-tournament structured game type they had, right? And it was this golden palace of beauty and awesomeness. And in this area in the first game, there were these giant statues that looked all winged and awesome, and I remember speculating about, like, lore-wise and being really intrigued by, right? They're these really cool things in one of the most competitive PvP areas from the first game. And they said, we looked at these statues from the first game when designing this armor. This armor is going to be super cool. This is the kind of heroic armor that we like, right? Someone had this cool idea. They got a cool design for the armor, and they said, look, this you can only get from winning these tournaments. That is huge incentive for people to play these things and garners huge excitement from the community, okay? And then I feel like someone else came along and said, but what about the people who aren't very good at PvP but also want the armor? And they were forced to cave to that guy. Well, I feel like some guy came along and said, yeah, but it's going to take us a lot of time to model and create these assets, and, you know, why should we spend all this time designing and developing something that is only going to affect a couple of people? Only a couple of people are going to get it. That's not worth our time. We have to make this more accessible to the Guild Wars 2 player base. Everyone in Guild Wars 2 has to have things accessible, and so then they tweaked their idea. And so the resulting idea, to quell the forum rangers perhaps, is that not only is there the Glorious Heroes armor, which you get from these exclusive tournaments, there is also just the Glorious armor, which presumably is going to be the exact same thing, just minus some flashy effect, and I'll get to that in a second, and anyone can get this armor. It's still exclusive to PvP, so that is a positive thing, but you get it just from completing reward tracks, which aren't difficult. They're just a matter of time to grind through, and if indeed these two armor sets are basically the same thing, it's just one is slightly flashier, I think that really cuts away at what was initially a really solid idea. Okay, my example to you guys here is the Worm armor. Worm armor is a very rare drop you can only get from doing the Triple Trouble Worm, and it's unique looking gear. This is a cool incentive to make people go do the Worm, but for many people it's not enough. Why is it not enough? Because it's literally the exact same thing as Ascended gear. It just has this green smoky effect applied to it. And for most people that has not been enough for them to continue running the Worm and getting their shot at it. For most people, it doesn't even look that good. That's a complete possibility here too. Some people might prefer the regular Glorious armor to the Glorious Heroes armor because they like the more minimalistic look or whatever. And so this really cuts away at what was initially a cool idea. My argument with this, like in terms of exclusivity, is that yes, while only a few players will probably only ever wear this armor, the winners of these tournaments, that doesn't mean it doesn't affect everyone else. That doesn't mean it doesn't affect everyone else's motivations in the game to go in there and play the game type. Not everyone everyone has to be able to get it for it to inspire drive to play the game. I really don't think that they should have added it to a normal PvP reward track. Obviously, there's going to be many of you guys that disagree with me, and you're just going to think, oh, they're adding something to the game, I feel like I should be able to get it, but I think that's really short-sighted, and it's a bit of a shame. Obviously, this could all be doomsaying. Maybe there's an immense difference between the Glorious Armor and the Glorious Heroes Armor, and I'm completely talking out of my ass. And in that situation, I will totally come back to what I'm saying and say I was a moron. But I feel like if it's only a slight tweak, if there's just some filter on the armor, but otherwise it's exactly the same, it's still cool. It's just nowhere near as cool as it should have been. Anyway, that's only half the story of this blog post, the armor. The other half of the story is that there's going to be a new option for PvP that addresses a big issue to do with the many different races and skill effects in the game. So, I'll describe this for a perspective of someone that doesn't PvP at all. If you are a big-ass Norn and you use certain skill effects, they will appear massive. So for any Guardians out there, imagine being a Guardian running a torch, and you use, I think it's the Torch 5, maybe it's the Torch 4, where you breathe fire everywhere, this blue fire. That animation is going to be huge. In fact, it's so large that it actually appears physically in the world where the damage isn't ticking. Like, the hitbox for the skill was always the same. If you're playing a Norn, you're not more likely to get hit by projectiles and stuff than if you were playing an Asura. Your hitbox is always the same. In that sense, the game is perfectly balanced, and race has no impact. However, for skill effects and animations, if an Asura is using that same skill, it will appear tiny, and in fact it will appear so small it's hitting enemies even though visually they would appear to be completely out of range. This has been a sore contention for a lot of people. They say that it's really unfair, and the result is that most people in PvP simply run Asura all the time. It's not so much, in my opinion, that animations scale differently on Asura. I feel like if you spend any time at all playing the game, you're eventually going to get a feel for what all of the skills ranges are anyway, even without having that visual cue. Even if the visual cue is slightly off, you know that it's the same in every matchup, and you would generally learn to play around it. The big thing with playing an Asura, though, is if, say, you have a giant Norn bunker who's dropping all these obnoxious skill effects everywhere that are massive, the Asura basically hide under them. There is a huge difference playing like an Asuran glass cannon compared to a Norn glass cannon. You can really feel it. I remember for a while I was playing a glass axe warrior in PvP, it was a huge difference to suddenly turn to playing an Asuran character and suddenly land all of your eviscerates because people are finding it that much harder to see the tells, or even notice that you're there doing something stupid like 100 blading on the point. It was a big difference, and now we've got a situation where it's like, okay, play Asura or go home. And you see in all of the tournaments, it's always Asura, always Asura, always Asura. So ArenaNet wanted to address this issue. They wanted to fix it somehow. And as they say in this blog post, it's kind of a difficult thing to fix. Their solution is an option which you can toggle on if you want, so you do not have to. What this will do is change the enemy team's models. So the way they deem it is your allies will still appear of the various races of the game. So you still get like that bit of flavor, right? You still get that, oh hey, I'm a Char and I'm a Norn and I'm showing off my look, and that still becomes relevant for Guild Wars 2's PvP, right? But the enemy players will all change to what they're calling standardized enemy models if you enable this feature. And this will make everyone a kind of a default middle of the road human character in the same armor and using the same weapon set at all times. And so through enabling this option, it completely removed any artificial routes to victory for your enemy, right? You're never going to feel cheesed out because you died to the Asura that you didn't see there. It's always the same size stuff, and it puts people on a level playing field. I don't think there's anything you can really complain about with the addition of this because it is just an option, but it's probably something we will see in the big tournaments. What I'm curious about is how this works with spectator mode. Like when we as an audience, for example, are watching a stream, are we going to be seeing everyone all using the same models, or are we going to be seeing, you know, the rich diversity that Guild Wars 2 has to offer in terms of its races and all of its armors? I would hope it's the latter because as spectators, maybe we don't need to see that much, but you know, I'm also kind of excited by the idea of just having PvP matches where there aren't so many obnoxious skill effects. Skill effects are so bad, they make it so hard to see what the hell is going on, especially for casual people who don't understand what's going on with PvP. And this addresses that slightly, but maybe not for us as spectators anyway. One final caveat to this is the only place it's actually going to be enabled by default in regular Guild Wars 2 is in the team arenas. If you just solo queue, even if you have it enabled in your options, this thing won't be on there. It's only for team queues. I think maybe that's a smart move, to be honest, because people are going to play solo queue, get annoyed about it, and then they'll say, oh, that's not there in team queues, and it's that bit more incentive to get more teams going in there. Seems a bit arbitrary, but every little helps, right? To clarify, though, you can absolutely turn this on in your custom arenas too, so there'll be custom arenas with it rolling. Alright, so those are the first two blogs of Competitive Week. I'll quickly roll us over the balance changes now. To be clear here, ArenaNet do a bi-weekly live stream, specifically about competitive stuff, specifically about PvP stuff, and recently they introduced a new feature, a new segment within this live stream called the Skill Bar, and the Skill Bar is there to specifically demonstrate changes and balance updates to the classes for the next feature patch. So every 2 weeks we see two classes, alright? So the first Skill Bar we saw featured the Engineer and the Ranger, and the second Skill Bar we saw, which was just last week, featured the Thief and the Warrior, and they go over in pretty decent detail what the changes to these classes are while demonstrating them off in the Heart of the Mists. They also did a blog post today though, which gives you a much more general overview of the changes. It's actually not that insightful of a blog post, especially compared to the skill bar, and you'll still want to tune into the skill bar, but there are some things that I've taken of note, since only 4 of the professions have been shown on skill bar so far, and this blog post goes over all of them. There is a little bit more information to be gleaned, so this is just what I found important. There will be a link in the description to this blog post if you want to take a closer look at your specific profession. As someone that mains Ellie, I'll talk about each of the Ellie changes. There's really not many. Number 1, let's get it out of the way with the FGS change that they've announced. They haven't said what they're changing. It's pretty clear to me, it was pretty clear even before this blog came out, the FGS rush is probably getting nerfed. This obviously isn't a PvP thing. It was for a little while where you could blink with it, and I guess it still is in very rare situations, but I certainly don't use it that much in PvP. FGS for dungeons has been predominant for a long time. It's very powerful, far too powerful. I agree with it being nerfed. It's also a mechanic that was unintended, and I think it's the word honorable of the devs to have left it be for so long. Like, when it was originally announced, for most people, it would definitely have been the kind of thing where it's like, wow, this is completely unintended, this is a complete exploit, we have to get rid of it. I feel like, I get very angry with ArenaNet when they change stuff just because it's unintended. They didn't originally see this intention, and so they're going to suddenly change it, even if it was maybe positive for the game. FGS, they gave it a lot of leeway. Despite how overpowered it was, they didn't nerf it to the ground straight away, and their initial impressions of it were, hey, this is just clever use of game mechanics, and they let it be. But it is clear that it stifles a lot of diversity in dungeons right now. Even as an Elementalist, I can see that. And as much fun as I have loading into COE every day and seeing how high I can make my FGS rushes tick on Alpha, like get 3.7k and be like, yeah, I'll get 3.8 tomorrow. As fun as that is, and as sour as I'll be to lose that, I'm not going to complain if they nerf Fiery Greatsword Rush, which I'm sure they will. Maybe they'll even add some quality of life, though, at the same time to make it useful in other niches. They also announced, in tune with the Elite, they said that they were going to change the Tornado. In skill bar for the Engineer, they announced that the Engineer's Tornado will now move a lot quicker and is constantly not only pulsing out whirl finishes, but is also a lightning field too. I'm expecting that exact change to be copied over for the Elementalist Tornado, but maybe there's some warrant for them not doing that, so that the Engineer's elite skills at least have some different flavor to them, but I'm not sure about that. They announced that they were changing Glyph of Storms to just add condies to it. How is that going to make it more viable, guys? Like, nobody cares if their Firestorm is now applying Burning, and the Lightning Storm applying Vulnerability is going to be nice, don't get me wrong, but not the be-all and end-all or something that's going to make people run this skill a lot more. Maybe it's a PvP-oriented change, but I maintain that all they need to do to Glyph of Storms is up the base damage by about the same that they randomly buffed the Ice Bow's base damage on, and then you'll see people running it. Finally, for the Elementalist, and this pervades for all of the professions too, they're updating and tweaking the new Grandmasters. So not necessarily the old ones, but the new Grandmasters they added, they said they're going to get further refinements. Specifically, they sound like buffs because they say that they're going to look at the ones that have no payoff or are difficult to use. So to me, as an Elementalist player, from what I've seen, I think they're probably talking about the new water trait. This was a new sort of general gameplay mechanic they introduced last feature pack, which is that you can increase your healing power potency, but only for other people. So this is like a way of incentivizing healing power in a way that doesn't also make the healer themselves some massive tank. It's a cool idea, but they need to nurture that. They really do, because people aren't playing into that mechanic. Healing power still isn't a thing, and they can't just let that sit there and do nothing. I really don't think they can. So I'm kind of hoping that they up the potency of this trait, and maybe we'll see people running it a little bit more, and they just need to continue refining that. They can't just add it to the game and then let it be and hope one day people are running it, because they just won't. The other Grandmaster I think that they could be changing, or is very likely, is their Arcane one, and this is where it's a Grandmaster that if you get hit in an attunement, you get a boon, and it's like the Elementalist's only pure way, like i.e. not outside of runes, to get retaliation. But I mean, really, come on, is that good enough for a Grandmaster? It's not. Like, I think it's a really weak trait. Probably needs some kind of big difference. In my opinion, the internal cooldown on it right now completely cripples it, but we'll see what they change. The other ones honestly do have some merit. The fire one, which is blind on burn, that's fantastic. People will have been running that. I've seen Ellie's in World vs. World running the new earth trait. The air one's kind of weak, admittedly, but again, in World vs. World, it's kind of funny to drop a static field on a whole Zerg, and then they all get lightning struck, interrupted, and weaknessed. But I think that could be up for a change too, because still it's very niche, and it doesn't have much payoff. It is difficult to use. So yeah, let's just talk generally about the other classes so that I don't bore you non-Ellies. Stuff that caught my eye: Guardians are actually getting a change to their tomes. Would you believe it? They specifically said there will be number tweaks, significant number tweaks, and quality of life for the Guardian tomes. Thank goodness. These things are so bad. Hopefully we'll see something interesting, and Guardians will actually have some option for the goddamn elites now, not just renewed focus all the time, which is probably one of the most boring elites out there. They're also getting their Guardian longbow activated command ability is now going to be like a ground targeted heal of an area, which will be interesting. Mesmer had a really kind of, I think, sad but necessary change. Mimic is a really cool skill, probably one of the most unique skills in Guild Wars 2, okay? You channel it. During that channel duration, you reflect all projectiles. The first projectile to have hit you, however, you store for yourself, and then you can unload on someone else. So if a warrior is trying to kill shot you, you can pop Mimic, absorb it, and then fire your own one back at him. It's a really cool idea. Interesting skill, led to some serious balance things, like in Fractals of the Mist, where you could apply Agony to stuff and just rip through things. And generally just a fun skill, but way too niche. Not many people using it. From PvP balance perspective, which is what they go at it from, it's just not being used enough. So they're completely reworking it, and now it just copies the boons that are on your enemies. Which, while strong, is also a lot more boring in my opinion, but maybe a necessary change. We also heard before on the skill bar that Thief was going to start cleaving with their dagger auto attacks. Necro is getting that same quality of life update, and they mention many kind of airy concepts of, oh, we're going to make them slightly more tanky somehow, and we're going to refine the axe. Which to me don't really mean very much. As I say, really specific skill balance changes. Definitely start tuning into Ready Up and watch those skill bars, because they are pretty fun to watch, I gotta say. Okay, so that's pretty much it for everything they've announced so far. There have been some other things out there in the community, which I'll talk about when we get to. For example, there have been interviews talking about World vs. World changes, and namely the commander tag system, their new concept on it. I've got some thoughts on that I'll share with you guys when they do that specific blog post. See, here's the way they've done it. This is competitive week, right? We still have 3 posts left for competitive week. Number 1 is tricks and explosive finales. Tricks are a thing they added to World vs. World, largely been unused for a long time, right? So they'll probably introduce something about that. The one after that is Command the Rainbow, which is definitely going to be talking about the fact there's going to be multiple colored commander tags now, each bought for 300 gold and so on. We'll talk about that there. And lastly, there's one called Prepare to Fight. God knows what that's about, we'll just have to wait. After competitive week is over, we have the announcement that week 2 is called a fresh start. This second week of reveals is focused on improving the Guild Wars 2 experience for new and veteran players alike. I did a bit of a controversial video recently talking about the idea of an attribute system and a change to the way the traits work. I think if they're going to do anything along those lines, we may see an announcement somewhere in that Fresh Start week. And after the Fresh Start week, there'll be week 3 called Collecting and Trading. So in September 2014, we're rethinking the way you collect and trade items. Could this be the announcement of actual player-to-player trading in the game? Actual barter coming back to Guild Wars 2? Life coming back to map chats? Trade channels? I would love to see that stuff, I really would. And the idea of collecting. Could this be an actual system for minis, for tonics? Who knows? I think maybe it might be, but they're some of the meatier things, and we'll be getting into those in the upcoming weeks. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, guys. I'll keep you posted about the feature pack from here on. Videos will be a bit shorter because I'll be up to date as they come out. Hope you have a great day, and I'll see you next time.